In this section, we're going to see what .NET MAUI pages are. Basically, .NET MAUI applications consist of one or more pages, and a page usually takes up the entire screen or window of an application, and each page usually contains at least some kind of layout. We have different types of pages such as ContentPage, FlyoutPage, NavigationPage, and TabbedPage, which are ones we are going to see in this section, and which are part of the .NET MAUI framework. We can see on the screen an example of an application. The page would be all the content that is part of this application. All this content that we see with a gray background, including this black part at the bottom, would be part of the page in .NET MAUI. Similarly, in this image on the right, all the content of this list, including the tabs at the top, would also be part of this page. So, the page is all the content that is part of a screen in the application. We're going to make different tests to know about the pages in .NET MAUI. And for it, we're going to proceed to create a new project with the template. We click on Next. Let's place a specific name for this project as, for example, Pages Demo. We have already created our project, and the first thing we need to know is how we can assign or where to assign the home page for our application. Let's go to the Solution Explorer, and we have as part of this project a file called app.xaml.cs, which is located below this hierarchy inside app.xaml. Let's open this file. As part of this file, we have a line that says main page equals to new app shell. This line is the one that is indicating which is the initial page of the application. In this case, we are indicating with this instruction that app shell, which is a page that is part of the hierarchy of our project, is going to be the initial page. Something that we can do is to indicate that we do not want this page to be the initial page, but that main page is the initial page. Then we're going to indicate that we want this page called main page to be the initial page. If we proceed to start the execution of the application, here we have already the application being executed. And maybe you might think that the application or the initial page is the same as the one we had before, but you're going to find out when we get to the shell module that this is not true. Let's move on to analyze the first type of page, which is the type of page called ContentPage. Let's proceed to analyze the page type called ContentPage. This type of page is a type of page that you're going to use the most when creating .NET MAUI based applications, since they are the ones that allow you to add layouts and different controls as part of the different pages. Even if we review mainpage.xaml, we can see that this is precisely a content page, that is the page we have already worked with before, and we can identify it through a tag called ContentPage. When you see this content page tag, it is indicative that you're going to have some kind of content. For example, in this case, the content page is indicating that it is going to have elements within its hierarchy. The first element is this element called scroll view. An important point to keep in mind with the content page type is that it can only contain one root level element in its hierarchy. For example, if we wanted to add an element called grid, which we will see later, we see that here is already marking us an error that tells us that the property called content is being set more than once. Then, as part of the hierarchy of the content page, you can have only one element. It is very important that you remember this. And how can we add a new content page as part of our project? Well, we have to right click on the project, we indicate that we want to create a new element, and inside the section called .NET MAUI, we have different types of pages that we can add. Let's proceed to add a .NET MAUI content page with the XAML syntax. We have here the name of the file that we can modify. For example, let's put ContentPage demo to the name of this file. Let's click on Add, and we have already created our new file called contentpagedemo.xaml with its respective associated C# file. Unlike the initial project, this content page has less content. The hierarchy of this element only contains a stack layout, and inside the stack layout an element called label that we are going to see later. Once we have created our content page, we are going to indicate that as part of the project, we want to set this content page as the initial page. We have already seen how to do this. We're going to go to the app.xaml.cs. We're going to indicate that we want to create a new instance of the page called ContentPage demo. We have to add this pair of parentheses to invoke the constructor, And once we have done this, let's start the emulator. The application has already been launched with the initial we have set up. Let's go back to the page we have created, and it is this content that has been declared as part of this page, the content that is being displayed in the emulator. As part of the content page, we have a property that we can modify, which is background color, to which we can set a color. We are going to indicate that, for example, we want a dark blue color for this, and once the application has been updated, we can see that this color has affected the whole page. Then, a page, as we had seen previously, it is all the content of a view of an application. For the moment, it is all that we're going to see of the content page type. I promise that later we will work intensively with this type of pages to create content. Knowing about navigation is an extremely important point when working with mobile applications. The way navigation works in .NET MAUI is based on a navigation stack. How does this stack work? First of all, an initial page is started, and as we access different pages, each of the different pages that we invoke are stacked on this navigation stack. If at any time we would like to return to a previous page, the page that is at the top of the stack is removed from the navigation stack, and we return to a previous window, in such a way that the different elements that are at the top of the navigation stack are removed. Let's see how we can implement this navigation stack in .NET MAUI. We are now back in Visual Studio. We're going to proceed to go to the mainpage.saml.cs file, which is the one here. We can see some logic that takes place when we press the button. As part of the graphical interface this file, we have defined a button that is going to allow us to click on that button to execute a certain action. In this case, it is defined through an event called click, and this click event refers to an event handler called onCounterClick. As the SAML file and the CS file are linked, by having an event handler defined as part of this file, we are indicating that we want that when this button is clicked, we want to invoke or execute the logic that is part of this event handler. We're going to proceed to remove this logic that is by default, and in its place, we're going to discover a property that is part of this type of pages called ContentPage. This property is the property called navigation, which is going to allow us to navigate between different pages. And as part of this property, we have a method called pushAsync, and we have a property called popAsync. Push is going to allow us to stack or invoke new pages to be placed on top of the navigation stack, and pop is going to allow us to remove those pages from the navigation stack by starting from the top of the navigation stack. Let's then indicate that we want to navigate to this page we created earlier called ContentPageDemo.saml. Let's use the pushAsync method, which receives a page element type, which is the page we created earlier. We have to create an instance of this page since there is no previous reference, and we're going to indicate that we want to create an instance of the ContentPageDemo class. Remember to use the pair parentheses, and already in this way we are indicating that we want to add an element to the navigation stack of the ContentPageDemo type. And for this to work correctly, remember that we must indicate that main page is the initial page. Let's start the application to see how it behaves with this change we have made. Let's click on the button that says click, but notice that it seems that nothing is happening when we click on this button. We have no exceptions, we don't have any message that tells us that something has gone wrong. However, the problem that's happening is that we're trying to go from a first page to a second page, but we haven't created that navigation stack, or we haven't told the framework how we want to handle that navigation stack. Therefore, we have to define a special page type called NavigationPage that will allow us to keep track of the pages that have been added to the navigation stack and those pages that are removed from the navigation page. How can we do this? We have to define as part of the property called mainPage a new page of type NavigationPage. Then we have to indicate that we want an element of type NavigationPage, which is a class. And as part of the NavigationPage constructor, we can specify an initial page that is going to be part of the navigation stack. In this case, we're going to indicate that we want main page to be the home page for the application. If we proceed to start the application, Let's click on the button again and see that this time we are already navigating to this new page that we have specified previously. We can go back to a previous page through this new bar that has been created because we are using a navigation page, and we can do this multiple times. One thing we can do as part of this navigation bar that we see at the top is to modify different properties. How can we do this? Well, we're going to proceed to modify different attributes that are part of that bar to modify the properties. We're going to proceed to declare a variable called NavigationPage, which is equal to this piece of code that we have indicated at the bottom. And subsequently, we're going to assign NavigationPage as part of this main page. But before carrying out the execution of the application, we're going to modify some properties of NavigationPage, which is going to be the instance only of the navigation page. We have some properties such as bar background color that we can set through colors, dot, and we can select one of these colors that are part of this list. For example, let's choose the color chocolate, and we can also specify through NavigationPage.textColor what is going to be the color of the text in the navigation bar. Let's access again to this colors class, and let's select, for example, the white color. And with this change that we have applied, let's proceed once again to run the application, and look how the bar has changed color. If we click on the button, we see this bar in brown color, and we see also the text in white color. Finally, something that might confuse you in case this is your first experience with mobile development is the following. Let's suppose that as part of this page that we have created previously, called ContentPage Demo, we create or define as part of this element stack layout an element under this element label of type button. We specify a property called text with the value click me. And we're going to proceed to define the click event. We have here an option as part of Visual Studio that allows us to create the event handler in a quick way so that we don't have to be creating it manually. What has happened with this, let me close this tag, is that as part of the code behind, let's quickly go to this file. This event handler has been created so that we can write C# code directly and perform some kind of action. In our case, we're going to indicate that we want to use once again the property called navigation, and we want to create a new instance as part of the navigation stack, but this time of type main page. We have replicated the behavior that we had previously in main page with this button. We simply create a button and define what action we want to execute when this button is clicked. Thanks to this click event, we're going to start the application. Here we have the application. Let's click on the button. Notice that we have defined this new button that says click me. Let's click it again, and in this way we can create many new references to this page. The problem comes when we define some element, as for example an entry element that we're going to know later. We're going to change only the color of the text by a white color so that this example is noticed correctly. We are not going to modify anything else so that it is a simple example. And if this time we click on the button and modify the content of this entry element that allows us to insert text, click again on click me, again on the click me, we arrive at a window where that content that we had previously has disappeared. And what some people often think is that there should be the same content if it is the same page, but the truth is that a new instance of this page has been created. If we go back in the navigation stack, we see how we arrived at the page that had the text we had previously entered. So you should not trust that by creating an instance of the same type of page, you will have the same content. Remember that there is always a navigation stack to which if we add more pages, this will accumulate as part of the navigation stack. The type of page we're going to examine is a type of page called FlyoutPage. This type of pages refers to that behavior that we see on screen, where we have a sliding window and we have different options as part of that sliding window that is regularly positioned over the main content. To use this type of page in .NET MAUI, we must create a new page as part of the project. Let's add a new element. We select a .NET MAUI content page. We're going to call this page FlyoutPage Demo. How can we make the change from a content page to a flyout page type? Well, we have to specify as part of the XAML file that we want to use precisely this type of page. but notice that this marks us certain problems as part of this definition of the page. And here what we are basically being told is that this type of page does not behave as a content page, but we have to work in a different way with this FlyoutPage. But before modifying this page, let's go to the file called FlyoutPageDemo.cs, and is that we also have to modify as part of the inheritance of this class definition what is the type of page from which we want to inherit, because currently we are indicating that we want to inherit from a content page and we have to match the type from which it is inherited in the C# class and the type that is used in the SAML file. Let's change this content page to FlyoutPage, and in this way we solve all the problems. Let's go back to the page we had created earlier, and to make the page to work properly, let's remove the content of the page. As part of a FlyoutPage, we have a property called FlyoutPage, where we specify what is the content for that slider, and also as part of this FlyoutPage, we can access the property called Detail, which will allow us to specify that section where we will have the main content of the application or the details of the flyout options. We can see some green marks that are indicating that we must specify a content for each of these sections. What kind of content should we specify? Well, the content is a content page. It is a second way in which we can use content pages. To perform this section, let's proceed to define a content page. Let's proceed to close this tag, and in this way, we would already be defining the content for this section called Flyout. I'm going to do the same for this section called Detail, and as part of this property called Flyout, the content page must have assigned an attribute called title. If not, you're going to have some kind of error. Let's indicate that, for example, the title for this content page is going to be equal to my app, and we can start defining the content for this content page. I'm going to paste here a code that I have previously created, and it is the definition basically of a label with a text and some additional attributes. I will proceed to do the same with this section of the details, keeping the application as simple as possible. Let's proceed to test the application. Let's quickly go to app.saml.cs. Let's indicate that we want to test our page that we created called FlyoutPage Demo. And once we start the application, we're seeing here the label to which we've assigned this caption, "Hello from Detail." And you might be wondering, where is the main flyout? Well, what we have to do is to drag from the left to the right, and in this way we discover the flyout element that contains this label that we specified also as part of the flyout content. As part of this type of page, we also have some additional options such as the property called Flyout Layout Behavior. We have different options that we can use. This value called default gives us a default behavior from the behavior of the platform. This popover option is the behavior that we saw previously with the application, that is, the detail page is partially hidden. We have another option called split, in which the flyout page is displayed on the left side and the details section is always displayed on the right side without the option to hide the flyout. These other options are quite descriptive. It is the same as with the split option, only that one works in landscape format and the other works in portrait format only. As an important point, for mobile devices this popover option is always used, even if we select some other option, because the space is too small to use these other options. For example, we're going to select the option called split, and we're going to do a platform switch to test the application on Windows. Here we have our application being executed, and we are seeing precisely that section of the flyout and this section of the details. We can quickly modify the color for each one of the content pages so that this is better appreciated. And this is what the application looks like. In this case, in Windows, we see that the flyout is in the left part and the section of the details in the section of the right. The last type of page that we're going to find in .NET MAUI is the tab-based page. Let's proceed to create such a page. To do this, we're going to create a new element as part of our project. We will indicate that we want a new element. We select the .NET MAUI content page template and change the name to TabbedPage demo. We're going to indicate that we do not want to use a content page, but we want to use a tab page type. Remember that we have to do the same in the code behind file. That is, we have to go to TabbedPage demo.saml.cs and specify that we want to use or inherit from the tab page type. Once we have done this, we quickly go back to the TabbedPage demo.saml file. And we see a problem that tells us that we cannot use a stack layout element as part of this tab page. And this is because, once again, TabbedPage accepts only content page elements, as opposed to the FlyoutPage type. We do not have to specify a flyout section and a detail section, but we can directly specify which are going to be the different content pages that are going to be part of our detail section. Let's proceed then to define a content page, and what is very important is to assign the property called title, since that title will be the one that will appear in each of the tabs. Let's specify, for example, page 1. Let's copy this line, let's paste it a couple of times, and let's change the title in each of these content pages. Let's go to app.saml.cs to indicate that we want this new page as the initial page. Let's start running the application to see what this page we have created looks like. That's the initial appearance of this tab-based page. We have the tabs located at the top, in this case because we are working with Android. The location of the tabs is going to be defined by the platform that we're working on. We have then each of the titles displayed, and we do not currently have content, but we could easily add it by going to the definition of each of the content pages. We will indicate that, for example, in the content page with the title page 3, we want to define a label element with a text equal to demo. It is something very simple so that we do not complicate much this demonstration. Let's start the application again. And if we go to the tab with the title 3, we can see here the content that could be as complex as you would like. As part of this type of page, we have some properties that we can use to modify the visual appearance of this page. For example, we have the properties called background color, bar text color, selected tab color, and unselected tab color. Let's start the application once again so you can see how these changes have affected the application. And see how each of these tabs that are part of our tab bar has been modified. However, it appears that a couple of properties have not been applied, which are selected tab color and unselected tab color. Why aren't they lighting up with the colors we have specified? Well, they have not been applied because these properties are intended to affect the icons that are part of the tabs. We can also specify icons for those tabs. How can we do that? We have to go to our content page on which we want to modify that icon, and we have to use a property called icon image source. As part of the assignment of this property, we could specify some element to be found inside the resources folder and inside the folder called images. Currently, we have an image called .NET_bot.svg, which is very useful since this format allows us to resize according to the platform or according to the device in which we are. Therefore, we don't have to worry about the specific size of the icon. Let's use this file. Let's specify the .NET_bot.svg value. And if we go back to the application, we can see that the icon is already being displayed as part of the first tab. If we select a second tab, look how it returns to the color we have specified with the unselected tab color property. We could apply the same icon for the other tabs. Let's do it. And here we have each of these elements applied. In the case that this pair of properties were not used, we would use the original color of the file, which in this case is this purple color with different color variations.